And we're back. Welcome to part 3 of the Joining FEMA 101 video series by yours truly. This video is all about the actual application process. I'm going to dispel some USAJobs myths, give you some resume and application tips, and talk about what to expect for an interview. First, if you haven't already, please take a look at the first 2 videos, which will provide a lot of context. So let's do this. First, I need to dispel a few myths that tend to circulate about applying for a federal position, especially with FEMA. Myth number 1, a machine does the first scan of the resume for keywords. This is false. At least according to HR reps that I've spoken to, real people with real eyes look at every resume. I can't speak for the other federal agencies if they use a machine to do their keywords, but do not focus your efforts on trying to beat a machine with FEMA. Myth number 2, the longer the resume, the better. False. Dear God, please do not. I have been on the receiving end of candidate resumes when I was at FEMA, and let me just say, I do not want to have to machete through 10 pages of your life story to determine if you're qualified or good fit for the job. You should be able to articulate how qualified you are for the position in just a few pages, especially if you are just jumping into the federal space or are new-ish in your career. My federal resume is 4 pages in total. Myth number 3, you must use the USAJobs resume builder to craft your resume. False. If you struggle with creating resumes, then by all means use the program, but you do not have to. Any resume template is fine so long as you put all of the right stuff in it, that I will explain in a little bit. Okay, now that we got some myths out of the way, let's get into what everybody wants, resume tips to make it out of the USAJobs black hole. If you're wondering if I'm qualified to do this, I would say yes, I am, in a sense. I have successfully made it onto the cert list that I will explain in a little bit, at least 6 or 7 times, and I've also gotten at least 3 to 4 other people through the black hole with these tips. I've cracked it. And I don't think Ochiko, which is FEMA's version of HR, would be too mad about me giving you these tips because they want to see good resumes. So let me switch over to my screen sharing platform and let's jump into it. Hello again. We are back in USAJobs. This should look familiar. And let me just emphasize, before I go on with this, if you haven't watched the first 2 videos where I give a lot more context and background, please go and do that first before I kind of explain more in depth about the application and resume process. So do that first. So let's just jump into tips here. So I just picked the first or one of the first job postings I saw in USAJobs for FEMA. And I'm going to start with tip number 1. And this again goes back to the first 2 videos. And that is, please make sure that you are qualified and able to apply for the position before you waste your time doing your resume and filling out all the stuff. And the 2 ways to make sure that you are qualified for that position is to go to the This Job is Open To portion. All of these icons say who this job is open to. So you can see this is open to competitive service employees, internal to the agency, so a current FEMA employee. It's open to veterans, it's open to Peace Corps alumni, it's open to military spouses, yada, yada, yada. So if you are not one of these, or if you do not fall into one of these categories, do not even waste your time. Move on. Go to the ones that are open to the public or executive service or another category that you fall into. The other piece, so once you decide that you do fit one of these categories, one or multiple of these categories, then you're going to skip all this and we're going to go down to qualifications here. We're going to spend so much time on this in this video. So under qualifications, you're going to look at these 3 bullets. And if you do not have this experience that you can articulate or argue for in your resume or in the interview or any part of this process, again, don't even apply for this. It says here, overseeing the administration of life cycle of federal grants and application through closeout, and they have and here. They don't have an or, so you have to have this bullet as part of your experience. You also have to have experience coordinating, communicating both orally and in writing with internal stakeholders relating to grant programs and grant management, and overseeing and or preparing financial and programmatic review of grantee documentation. So to be qualified for them to consider you for this position, you have to fit those categories at the top, and you have to have experience in your resume that speaks to these things. So that is tip number 1. Make sure that you are qualified to apply for the position. Okay, so for tip number 2, I wanted to open a different job posting. This is a program analyst position in recovery headquarters in the DC area. This is a GS, or rather an IC-12 position. It's open to the public, so more of the viewers watching this could probably apply for this one. So I wanted to use this one for tip number 2. So let's scroll back down to qualifications, because again, this is kind of all you need. Where'd it go? Oh, right by it. All you need to know when you apply for the position is to just really understand this qualification section. So tip number 2 is, once you decide, yes, I like this job, yes, I am qualified, and I can show that I'm qualified, you're going to go to these bullets here. They're right here, 3 bullets. And you are going to ensure that your resume has this peppered throughout it. And what I mean by peppered is, don't like copy and paste exactly these bullets all throughout your resume. In fact, they just started doing this, I just realized. They literally say this: do not copy and paste the duties, specialized experience, and questionnaire questions in your resume. I agree with that. Don't do it. They don't like that. But throughout your entire resume, just make sure that you explain in your previous experience how you have done these 3 things. You can like reword it, you can expand on it. That's all you got to do, because that's all that HR needs to know is like, do you have experience evaluating and developing requirements for acquisitions? The second one, like utilizing electronic systems to order, initiate, track, and expedite information. So the cool thing also about this is that you guys will notice that these are not emergency management like position descriptions. Like, it doesn't say like has gone to a disaster and done this. These are very generic job descriptions, right? Utilizing electronic systems to initiate, track, and expedite information. Like if you worked at like UPS or something like that, where you've tracked things using electronic systems, then FEMA would probably find your experience valuable. That is tip number 2, and I cannot overstate it enough, is to just make sure you understand the bullets that they have listed here for qualifications and tailor your resume every time to show that you have these 3 pieces of experience for the position. That's all you need to do to get through USAJobs, frankly. Also, and I'm sorry I buried the lead on this, but I do have a template of a federal resume, actually based off my federal resume, in the description of this video as a PDF for you guys to peruse and see kind of what they generally look for. I have used this resume for multiple jobs at FEMA, and I have gotten through to final rounds on multiple jobs. Again, I wouldn't copy it verbatim. They might get suspicious, but you could just kind of see the language that I use, like the formatting that I used, and all that kind of stuff as you build out your resume for your next FEMA job. So anyway, let's get back into USAJobs. Okay, I have 2 more tips for you guys, but first I want to do a quick aside to explain something that I think might confuse everyone, and this came up as I was looking through job postings on USAJobs, and I remembered that this was another weird thing about FEMA. So for that one, I picked a different position, and this is another program analyst position. And the reason this one's a little weird is because it's considered a ladder position. And you'll know it's a ladder because if you go over here to pay scale and grade, it has IC 9 to 11. So what that basically means is if you apply for this position, you could either come in at a 9 or an 11. And the cool thing about that is, because it's a ladder position, it has kind of built-in promotion to it. So if you come in at a 9, after I want to say a year, you can automatically promote up to an 11. And that's awesome. It's the federal government, or at least FEMA, is not like the military where like you come in at a certain level and then you just keep getting promoted and promoted and promoted and promoted, like just out of merit, unfortunately. At least that wasn't my experience at FEMA. So again, this is a ladder position, and let me just show you what the qualifications piece looks like if you were interested in applying for like one of these ladder positions, these unicorn positions really, because they're pretty awesome when you can find them. So if you go down to qualifications, you will see here it says to qualify for the position of an IC9 level with a starting salary of about $65,000. These are basically the only two requirements you need to meet, are these two very vague job bullets here. If you scroll down here, they have more information, and this is to qualify for the position at the 11 level with a starting salary of $78,000, so it's a bit of a bump. You have to have both of these bullets in your background that you need to show in your resume, and you need to also show you have this experience. So if you decide you want to apply for this position here, the thing is, when you go to apply for it, you have to tell the system which of the two you want to apply for. But again, just to reemphasize, because it is a ladder position, if you go in at the lower tier, you have an automatic path to promotion, which is fantastic. You don't always get that at FEMA. I wanted to quickly explain that before I go into the next two tips, which are coming up. Okay, so for tip number 3, I'm back in the other program analyst position to explain this part a little bit more. So for tip number 3, I'm going to direct your attention to this part of the paragraph here, this sentence, or this part of the sentence. It says, you must possess 1 full year of specialized experience. So when they write that, they literally mean it. So it says you must possess 1 full year of specialized experience in the bullets below. So the tip for tip number 3 is, especially if you're a job hopper, like me, no shame, I'm a job hopper, you should put as specific as the dates as you can remember working somewhere so that HR can actually do the math and prove that you have done that for a year. So, for instance, what will not work for you is if you had an internship, a summer internship, where you did this, and that's your only experience. You worked for the summer at UPS, as an example, utilizing electronic systems to initiate yada, yada, yada. And that was your only experience, and you show on there that it was just a summer internship, then you're not going to be qualified for the position. They're not going to count it because it wasn't a full year. I kind of got in some trouble sometimes with that myself because I am a job hopper, and I had quite a bit of like internships in the past, and so I had to really spell it out for them, like 6 months here, 2 months here, 1.5 years here, and that culminated into over a year of experience, etc. So that is tip number 3. Okay, so tip number 4, my final tip, can be found under required documents here. And this is probably the only tip that Ochiko might get kind of mad at me about, but you guys have to know that other people are giving this advice as well, so you can't be mad at just me. So tip number 4 is under required documents here, you'll see number 2, it'll say your responses to the job questionnaire right here. So when you apply for the job, you will submit your resume, and then you'll also click through and put your demographic information, your personal information, all that kind of stuff. And then eventually you'll get to a job questionnaire. And it's also sometimes called the supplemental questions. You might hear people use that phrase as well. So when you get there, sometimes it'll just be like, are you qualified for this position? Yes, no. It'll be just like not too many questions, but sometimes they're going to ask you to rate yourself on how good you are in a certain area. So my tip number 4 is when you get here and they ask you to rate yourself, you are going to put yourself on the highest pedestal possible. You are going to rate yourself amazing in everything, even if you're not necessarily amazing, but this will stop you from getting any further. Even if your resume is incredible, even if you truly have all of the qualifications, everything that you possibly need, if you do not rate yourself like 5s on everything, you will likely be stopping yourself through getting through the process. That's been my experience, even recently. Honestly, I think that they should judge you in your interview and through your resume to see that. So that is my next tip, is when you go to rate yourself in the questionnaire, make sure that you rate yourself as awesome in every category so that you can get yourself through that next layer. So you're probably wondering, okay, Stephanie, I have followed all of your tips. I applied to this job that I'm totally qualified for, and I totally have it in the bag. What do I expect now? Well, I'm so glad you asked, and let me shrink my massive face down and show you my email inbox. And this is what you can expect next. So first email you're going to get is application received. It's going to read something like this. Thank you for your interest. We've received your application for the job opportunity, yada, yada, yada. We are currently reviewing to make sure you meet all the requirements. Cool. So from there, you will get one of two emails. And that email will come either in 3 weeks, 3 months, or like a year. So it's just unfortunately how FEMA works. It will either say, this one, either application status update, not reviewed or not referred. So this one, I was not referred to a position. Yada, yada, yada. Your application was not referred to the selecting for further consideration. So this was a rejection email. So the good email you should get, if you go back, will be this one where it says referred. Yeah, status, let me pick this one specifically. Application status referred. So this is exciting. You were among the best qualified and referred to the selecting official for consideration. If you get this email, you should do a little happy dance, just a little dance. That is because when they say you are the best qualified candidates, that means you made it into the top 10 to 15 applicants who applied. And like hundreds of people sometimes will apply for these positions. So you beat out like maybe like 180, 190 applicants. And that in and of itself is a feat. That means you made it out of the USAJobs black hole. Whether or not you get an interview from here, whether or not you get the job, you should still be really excited that you beat it, you cracked it like me. The other thing that happens with this is, I mentioned it earlier in the video, but if you are referred for a position, you have made it onto something called the cert list. The cert list means that you are making it further in this position. However, if the department that posted the position happens to have another position open, then they can snag your resume and be like, maybe this person will be better for this position. It has not happened to me, but it has happened to people I know where they have applied to a position and somebody else in the department took their resume and they like brought them in for an interview for a different position. So this is really awesome. So I also want to tell you what happens from here too, from behind the scenes. So once you're referred, that means that FEMA HR Ochiko has looked through all the resumes. You're in the top candidates. They're going to put a packet together to send over to the hiring manager. So now it's out of HR's hands, and now you're being sent over to the actual department where you applied for. Then the individuals will look at those top 10 resumes, and they will decide which 3 to 4, maybe 5 candidates they will decide to interview. A few other emails you could get, or maybe just one. So non-selection, I believe for this one, I either had done an interview and they didn't choose me, or this might have been after the referred, where they sent my resume with the packet of 10 over, and then I wasn't one of the 5 that they chose to interview, so I got the non-selection. But I made it pretty far in this process, and that was something to be excited about. So that's what to expect. So I just wanted to end the video on some last-minute information on the interview process and what to expect when you get your interview. So if you get selected for an interview, it really depends on the position and the department and all sorts of stuff, whether or not you're going to get a phone interview first. Some positions I have gotten a phone interview first with HR. Sometimes it was somebody from the actual team, and sometimes not at all. Now the main interview that you should care about is the larger one that will generally be a panel interview. I can't really speak on the reservist side of the house. I can speak slightly on the local hire side because I had one interview as a local hire once. From the headquarters or regional aspect, it's most likely going to be a panel interview with people within the department or departments that are adjacent to it, where they've asked people to come in to be third parties. And the panel interview, in my experience, has been conducted either over Zoom or Teams, or if you're close to the area, sometimes they might ask you to come in person. And the thing about panel interviews is they suck. It'll be like 6 to 8 to 10 questions, really depending on the position and the department. And each question, in my experience, has been like an essay question, frankly. I'm not great with interviews, so I'm not going to sit here and give you actual interview tips because I'm really bad at them. There's probably people all over the internet who can give you better tips than me. But from a what to expect kind of standpoint, generally it's going to be some sort of panel interview where they'll ask you all sorts of questions, and you just have to do your best. So that's all I have for you guys for this series. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, on YouTube, anywhere you can find me, and I will be happy to answer any more questions that you might have. Thanks so much and good luck!